So here's something I'm sure absolutely no one ever saw coming. Sony is making their own spin on Nintendo's classic systems, and they're calling it the PlayStation Classic. I want to start by just saying how I love that they didn't even come up with a new name, just like, screw it, call it the Classic, everyone knows what we're doing here. So for $100, Sony will give you this shrunken down version of the original PlayStation that will come preloaded with 20 games. In terms of price, specifically price versus quantity of games, this is about what I'd expect. If you've been paying attention to the Nintendo Classic consoles, the trend will likely continue to be less games and a higher price tag as they continue to move to later systems, and this is about where I'd assume the inevitable N64 Classic to be, with each game breaking down to about $5. I think that's a reasonable price, given one key factor that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, seeing some of these old games in action again, I've gotta say, man, some of that early 3D, it is pretty rough to look at. I grew up with these games, so I don't have as much of a problem with it, but I do think these early 3D titles are going to be a tough sell for those who don't have much nostalgia for them. Obviously, these classic systems in general, the nostalgia cash-in is the key, but I do think there are plenty of people who are younger, don't have the same feeling of nostalgia towards the NES or SNES as some of us older folks do, and still want to pick them up just to experience the games. And I think the 2D stuff on the NES, the SNES Classic, is way easier on the eyes than the stuff we're going to get here. Now, that's not to say there aren't plenty of amazing games on this thing, including ones that aged amazingly well. Sure, the 3D stuff isn't the best looking, but something like Symphony of the Night, if we got some Soten on this thing, that would be sweet. And herein lies the problem with like the price that I alluded to, and with me personally getting excited about this whole PlayStation Classic. We still don't know what most of the games are. In the reveal, we only learned about 5 of the 20. Final Fantasy VII, Ridge Racer Type 4, Jumping Flash, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms. A pretty decent initial few games. I do get that you want to hit a wide array of genres, but I can't help but feel like Jumping Flash is pretty in my opinion. I'd almost say Ridge Racer as well. A good game for its time. Like, I understand you have to have some kind of car game in it. Like, if I was making the list and you told me that I had to pick a car type game to put in there, I'd probably put in something like Twisted Metal 2 that's, more arcadey and more fun, at least to me. And that makes me kind of worried because, like I said, there are so many great PlayStation 1 games to choose from, and with only 20 slots, any that feel kind of wasted is going to be a big oof from me. And you'd think you'd want to put your best foot forward in this initial reveal to like really get people excited. And, I'm just thinking, like, how was the original Metal Gear Solid not featured here? I don't even think you should be allowed to make a PlayStation Classic if it doesn't come with that game. Also, the fact that there aren't going to be DualShock controllers, which definitely the preferred way to play a game like Metal Gear Solid, and it looks like we're just going to get the originals with no sticks. Seeing stuff like that makes me have to at least consider that they may cheap out with the game selection on this. Like, with this thing coming out in December, okay, we're already close to the end of September, so I don't see how it's possible they could only know 5 games for sure that are going to be on this. And if they do know what the other games are, well, why don't they want us to know? Now, here's the thing. I am not trying to hate on the PlayStation Classic, being a Nintendo fanboy, trying to downplay it, or anything like that. Quite the contrary. I hope this system is packed to the gills with classics. Like the Konami stuff I mentioned, add Silent Hill to that maybe. Resident Evil 2, the original, I think would be fantastic with the remake coming out the next month. Legend of Dragoon, I could go on. And actually, do we want games that have gotten remasters here? Because we're getting into that territory now. Like getting representation from the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon series, you'd think would be essential for a PlayStation Classic. Do we want those taking up slots when they already have these beautiful remasters? And again, we only have 20 spaces to work with. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Should we still be putting in these games that are essential to that catalog, but, have these much superior versions for us to play on a wide scale right now? Because I really want them to make this thing a must-have for retro enthusiasts. Because, and here's what makes me giddy like a little schoolgirl, While it hasn't been announced, I think it is very safe to assume Nintendo is going to be coming out with an N64 Classic. We know they've already filed patents for the controllers in that, and moreover, with each the NES and SNES Classics being massive successes, certainly causing others like Sony here to get on this gravy train, they'd be stupid not to do one for the N64. And that would mean the 90s are back, baby, and in full force. I would absolutely love to essentially be able to cover the PlayStation versus N64 console war part 2. To be able to walk into a store and see PlayStations and N64s stacked up next to each other on the shelves. Actually, who am I kidding? We know the scalpers will grab all those. But people, and think about this, people will be deciding, do I get a PlayStation or an N64? Potentially in the year 2018. I really do hope Nintendo does drop an N64 Classic announcement on us soon to kind of stick it to Sony. I definitely feel like that's what Sony was doing, announcing the PlayStation Classic the same night as Nintendo's online service went live, with one of the big selling points of that service being the classic NES games. But yeah, I just think making videos about how this all plays out, what the sales are, what these games end up being, how they stack up against each other, it would be such a great time. And Nintendo will have some hurdles to overcome with their system as well. Definitely licensing issues with many of the great games from that era. All the rare stuff, your Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, probably not going to be able to get that stuff. I'd love for them to get some more hidden gem type surprises in there like Mystical Ninja or Ogre Battle 64, but certainly I don't think they're going to have to dig as deep for a solid lineup as Sony's going to have to. I mean, just Nintendo's first party alone from the N64 era could give you something awesome. And like I said, it will probably end up being something similar, around 20 games for about $100 or so. Will it actually be different? Will be interesting to see. If Nintendo offers up more or less games at a similar price, could play a major factor in this early on. But I want to make this abundantly clear, want them both to offer stellar lineups, because if this feels overly obvious like one is a much better product, then it's not going to be nearly as interesting to cover. And clearly, as consumers, we want them to give us the best products possible. I want to be able to recommend both of these to people. Sure, if you're a bit on the older side like me, late 20s, early 30s, and upwards, it's easy to get sucked into these things by the nostalgia. But even for younger people, those of you who perhaps are looking at some of these games and maybe like, ugh, I want to be able to even tell you that they're worth picking up to experience a slice of gaming history. But with that, this video's a wrap. Just wanted to bring up the fact that we may soon be looking at this console war being reignited. Definitely let me know which side you'd be on if this does happen. Granted, we don't know the games yet, but which do you think will be the more enticing product, and which system and library do you have the most nostalgia for? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the potential for the PlayStation and N64 to do battle once again. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter @JohnnyZakari and join my Discord, Shy Guy and Friends. Link to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.